Hey everyone, welcome to the Recruitment Show. We are talking about all of the major topics that people are discussing right now. Everything recruiting, future of work, and everything in between. I've got guests from all over the world to come and share their perspective and their thoughts and feelings and all of that stuff on these key topics. It might not be politically correct. It might not be what you want to hear, but it's people's perspectives, and it's important to hear people's perspectives. I love storytelling, and I think one story can illuminate a million more and really increase our understanding of these topics. So sit back, whether you're watching live or after, grab a drink, take a seat, and enjoy. Awesome, and we're live. Natalie Boudou, I pronounced your name right. Thank you so much for joining me, all the way from Switzerland.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Really happy to be here.
Thank you. It's great. I mean, the stuff that I know you've just released a book, HumanForce, and all the EQ stuff and emotion intelligence is just super interesting, especially as all this AI and tech, and it's just, just catapulting forward at like a ridiculous speed. I think for me, the human stuff is even more important now. So I've been excited to speak to you about this.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and it's true. We're all talking about ChatGPT and all the tech stuff, but actually, we need to value the human potential as much as we can. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I can't remember who the economist was. I think it was an economist speaking at the World Economic Forum, and I think the question was, will AI take our jobs? And he was like, AI won't take your jobs, but people using AI will take your jobs.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. AI, I think you have to think about how you can use AI within your jobs. But one thing I don't think it will take is our ability to use our empathy and to use our emotions, as I talk about in the book. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I love that. And then there's this really interesting website. What's it called now? I'll remember and I'll put it in the comments later. But it has photos and stuff of all the various different newspapers over the years. It goes back all the way to like the 1920s and maybe earlier. And it's funny, every 10 years, it's like AI is taking our jobs, tech are taking our jobs. It's, literally like 20s, 30s, 40s,
never
50s.
Ending.
And you're like, literally never ending. But the human stuff is interesting. And so obviously let's focus on that. And some of the stuff you talk about, and it's really interesting, is around vulnerability. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it. And certainly for leaders, I think certainly, historically it's not been so cool as a leader to be vulnerable. Or like the caricature leaders always like, alpha, never showing a crack. So. And what are your thoughts on that? Has it changed, do you think?
I think it's still changing. I mean, I think it's getting better, but I think we still need to educate and raise awareness about how vulnerability can be a really powerful tool. Vulnerability can be a really powerful tool, but of course, it has to be done in the right way. I give an example about a client of mine who was the director of a large IT division, and they had been preparing for a long, long time this huge international event, and COVID struck. And of course, this international in-person event had to be cancelled very quickly. And everybody was so despondent. Everybody was so unhappy. And the director got everybody together. First of all, he asked them how they were feeling, which was wonderful, to take the pulse and to check out how they were feeling. But then he shared with them the fact that he too was sad. And he shared with them the fact that for him, it was also frustrating. And that's a bit of vulnerability there. But then he went on to say, yes, this is a difficult moment, but let's not forget, we have another event to look forward to in a few months, which will be virtual. And we need to prepare for that and make sure that it's as good as possible. And so what he was doing there was actually selective vulnerability. So he was both showing how he was feeling, which helps the people to connect to him and respect, of course, there's a mutual respect that goes there. But at the same time, he was steering them on and he was showing that he still was in charge. And I think that's a skill, definitely.
It's a massive skill, because I think a lot of I'd say over the last few years, I speak to a lot of leaders, and it's quite lonely there, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
always, depending on what type of person you are, like sometimes people don't seek help when you're in a leadership role. You just feel
Absolutely.
like have this heavy weight of,
It's
you
a
know,
good point.
responsibility.
Yeah, it's a good point, Lewis. I think you're right. And I think that people don't realize that actually asking for help is a great strength. But they feel that they can't. And so, yes, in terms of their own personal well-being, the ability to ask for help or to say, you know what, I'm struggling with this, is often a really important thing to be able to do.
Yeah, it's also really empowering for the team, because
Yes.
if your team see you saying, "Hey, you know, I'm struggling," or "I'm afraid of this," or something's going on, and you're being vulnerable,
Yeah.
you're being open to it. It
Yeah.
then also, it gives permission, but just encourages people if they're feeling something similar
It
to
does.
also share.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we often hear the words, I don't know if you hear the words a lot, psychological safety bandied around. That is the
Yeah.
ability for a leader to create a safe space for the teams to share when they're not happy, or to give a suggestion, give an idea, or disagree. And if the leader is vulnerable in the right way, that lays the foundations for a psychologically safe team. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And just so we know, what's that? I'd love to talk about what is the definition of psychological safety, because it's talked a lot about, and just want to make sure we've nailed down the.
Do you know what? There are so many different definitions, and I often get asked this, and so I come at it from my angle, But I think it's generally accepted that it's the ability to offer an idea, disagree, voice an opinion, express one's feelings without fear of being judged or reprimanded for doing so. I think that is, for me, that's maybe the shorthand way, but that's
I like that.
what it is. Yeah.
And what are you seeing, like in terms of like creating an environment at work that's safe psychologically? Is there any like kind of best practices or tips, or like how does that even evolve?
So it's really interesting. I mean, I think a lot of it goes back down to this emotional stuff. In the book, I refer to it as emotional safety. But I think basically you need to create this emotionally safe team. And so there are various things you can do. Obviously, we've talked about vulnerability. The leader can demonstrate vulnerability. That's one way. But another thing is to do things. For example, when you check in with your team, when you ask them, "How are you?" Perhaps it's a one-to-one. Perhaps it's at the beginning of a team meeting. But just checking in and taking the emotional pulse is a great way to show that you care, and that it's okay to talk about how you feel. So that's one way of doing it. And I always encourage leaders to say, are you checking in? Particularly remotely, people forget to do that nowadays. They think, they don't realize it. It's an added responsibility when you're working remotely. So that's one way. Another way is to, you can actually create a kind of charter with your team. How is it that we would like to behave with one another? What's acceptable? How can we express ourselves? Create those sort of unwritten rules that we'd like to talk about perhaps more openly. So that's not one great way to create safety. And then there are other things which are, for example, not criticizing when somebody fails, but almost saying, well, that failing, okay, it didn't work out. Let's take it as a learning. What can we learn from it? Let's share our learnings on a regular basis. We can also share about things that don't go so well. I mean, some people talk about celebrating failure. Okay, maybe, but
Learn.
learn. Those are some of the things that you can do, I think.
Yeah. Because you want to be in an environment, for me, that people are, you feel that people are with you, not waiting for you to fail or waiting for you to pick yourself up, but just
exactly.
We're here together. Let's win, let's learn, let's fail, let's whatever together.
Absolutely. It is that we, isn't it? It's moving away. A leader needs to move away from the I to the we. So, for example, big ego, not going to be very conducive. So, yes, it's very much that we collaborative spirit. Yeah.
The moving from I to we is really interesting, because if you think because we're not, if you think about success early on, right? It's like, so let's say do well at school is I.
Yeah.
And then like a lot of the sports. I mean, if you're doing team sports, there's an early we there for sure. But like you do well at school, maybe you go to university, you do well at university is I. and maybe you get your first job, that's I. Then early on, it's individual contributor roles. Again, it's I, right? And then suddenly you make it to a role where actually it's about serving your team, and we, and helping them do great. And it's quite hard. You know, it's like suddenly it's like, and especially if you don't do team sport, because I think team sport, you learn that early. If you're not doing team sport and stuff, it's a very weird thing to suddenly move to.
It is. You're absolutely right. I mean, some people might be lucky enough to be part of a big family, and perhaps when they're growing up, they are taught to help and support each other, perhaps. But as you say, I think it's not something that is, you know, necessarily given to everybody. And that's why leadership training is fundamental. Leadership training and coaching is fundamental, because we're not all born into that. And
we're not.
Yeah.
Can I just give a little? I just want to give a little. This is a stat. I couldn't believe it, and it was like, I saw. McKinsey did a report recently. I went to see one of their partners do a talk. I've forgotten her name now. Anyway, the big stat was when people were polled about what the biggest stress in their job was, 75% of people said their boss was the biggest cause of stress.
Yes, I can totally relate to that, Lewis. Totally. You know, it's a cliche, but it's true. You don't necessarily leave your job; you leave your boss. And I, for one, know that if I look back over my career, the times when I have left work, apart from one incident where I didn't feel there was room to grow, all the other incidents have been because of my boss. I don't know about you, but that's how it is for me. Yeah,
no, it's true. I mean, you know, I speak with, like, you know, thousands of people about work, life, career, etc., from what I do. And, you know, money's never top of the list of why people want to move.
No,
it's always it's people, human connection. And you know, I'm trying to poach people from companies, and happy people are way harder to move.
Yes.
And they're often happy because of these things.
You're right. You're totally right. I mean, I didn't leave my job because there wasn't a gym, or because there wasn't, you know, a
free snacks
salary, or mindfulness classes, you know. So yeah, it is what it is. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if 75% of bosses know they're the biggest cause of stress for their team.
I don't know. Would they be interested? I don't know, Lewis.
I don't know, but, you know, like what we've just talked about, I mean, you know, if you even need like a business case for like this kind of stuff, you know, like your company's made up of people, and you can have the best business plan, and you could have raised money and whatever. But if you're not being able to keep your team and all of that stuff, then
it's very true. You're absolutely right. It's fundamental. Yeah.
How can you measure it? So the psychological safety. I mean, perhaps, you know, we talked about people leaving jobs, so maybe candidate retention. Is there any way of someone just thinking, actually, I could do with?
Yes, you can measure it. You can measure it. I mean, one of the things that we do at HumanForce is we have a culture survey. So it's much like this. Well, you talk a lot about engagement surveys, but the culture survey is really looking for that safety. So you can measure it. You can do it in a survey. You can do it in focus groups, providing that you know what questions to ask, and providing that it's done in the right way. You can see how people are feeling. Do they feel that they can be themselves? You know, are they masking? Do they feel they belong? Are they able to disagree? Are they able to come up with solutions? Do they feel empowered? You know, all these questions you can ask. Providing you ask in the right ways, you can get an accurate picture. Definitely, yeah.
This is slightly cynical, but I'm going to say it anyway. But, you know, people always talk about bringing your authentic self to work, but it always really feels like they mean, you know, bring your authentic self to work as long as you believe what I believe. Otherwise, I don't want to hear your, you know, like the certain topics that politics, for example, obviously is a key one. But, you know, there's certain emotive topics where I think people, if they found out that someone thinks the opposite or has the opposite view, find it very difficult to work together in a team. What do you think of? I
think that's true, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done in that area, because it kind of ties into the belonging aspect. You know, everybody's talking about belonging. We talked about diversity, inclusion. Now we're talking about belonging, which goes one step further than diversity and inclusion. It's about, you know, not only are you included, but you actually feel that, you know, you can bring your whole self to work and you are appreciated for who you are. So it ties into that. And I think that there needs to be more work done to have open and honest discussions and exchanges at work, particularly where you've got diverse teams, you've got diverse, really different sorts of perspectives. People need to listen to each other and approach it with emotional intelligence, incidentally. But I think we need to have open conversations and exchange. We need to be curious about each other and learn how to do that. Because I think sometimes it's just window dressing, the way that it's approached. You can have, I don't know, unconscious bias training, or you can have this or that. But actually, do people listen to each other? Are they curious? Do they respect each other's? I think it comes from there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think good culture is, to an earlier point, isn't free snacks and the foosball table and stuff. It's caring about each person, because everyone's different. And stuff. The other thing to this actually is again, like it obviously talks about a lot, belonging and bringing your whole self to work and stuff. But then there's a lot of folks that, I was speaking to someone the other day and they're like, I don't want to bring my whole self to work. I want to just go to work and I want to do my work. And I don't want to share I don't want to share stuff with my colleagues. That's okay too, right? I mean, because
provided
this thing of
it's okay, provided you are not how can I say, providing it's not causing you harm, because at the end of the day you must, when we come back to the emotional side again, you must be able to be who you are. If you are masking, for example, if you are doing some kind of what I call emotional labor, that's very tiring and that can be detrimental to your health. So if it works for you and you don't have to cover up, or you don't have to pretend, or you don't have to ignore things, or you don't have to stifle your emotion, then that's fine. That we have a personal life and we have a work life, and we don't have to be exactly the same in both areas, but we have to be true to us, to how we feel. I think that's important.
Yeah. It's hard to find that balance, because it's a whole range of, because some people are just, they share everything. I probably overshare, and others are a little bit more, this is my work and these are work relationships, and I'm here to do my job.
Of course. I think that's okay. I think that's fine. We're all different, as you say. Some share, some overshare, some don't. But the ultimate is how you are behaving at work. Can you be who you are, or are you not, for example, talking about your partner because for fear of being judged, or talking about your religious festival for fear of being judged, or or talking about the fact that you are actually very stressed and not mentioning it to anybody because your fear of being judged. So it's really how you can behave and feel good at work. No,
I love that. You mentioned empathy a few minutes ago. And how important do you feel that is for leaders?
Huge. Absolutely fundamental. There've been a lot of surveys done that show that those companies that have empathetic cultures and empathetic leaders are constantly outperforming those companies that don't. And the same in terms of building trust and having, good leadership. Empathy is really important. And empathy also is a great way to get accountability as well. It's not always easy to get accountability.
In what way? In what way?
In what way? Well, if you just say do this, or if you don't do this, then there'll be trouble, or I expect you to deliver this now, tomorrow, whatever. People might not always react to that in the right way. They might not necessarily want to do that. They might not feel motivated to do that. But if you approach it from an empathetic perspective, bosses who are empathetic, you find, and research shows this, that they will automatically get more accountability. So it's not, one is not, they're not independent of each other. They can actually work very well together. So an empathy is just enormous, because when you're empathetic, then you're building trust. The other person feels that you care. The other person feels that you're interested in them. And again, it doesn't mean that you agree with them. It's not about being kind or agreeing. It's about showing that you get where they are. And I think that's really important.
And how is that related, or is it the same as emotional intelligence? Where is the...
It's part of emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is quite a wide spectrum of things, ranging from how you manage your own emotions to how you work with others. And that's, of course, empathy is in there, to impulse control, to flexibility. There's so many different elements of emotional intelligence, and empathy is one of the cornerstones of emotional intelligence.
Okay, interesting. And are you finding that, because I know you do a lot of work on EQ,
Yes.
And you
Yes.
finding now some of the best leaders are actually some of the most empathetic. Because again, if you kind of look at this caricature leader,
Yes.
they've never been, maybe they always were, but they've never been portrayed as empathetic, have
No,
they?
no, no.
Historically.
I think that empathy. So I think the best leaders are those who have a good balance of empathy and accountability, as well as all the other things that you need to be a leader. But I think that empathy certainly builds trust. It certainly builds an environment within which people will perform for you better. I think it's absolutely key. I think that a lot of people overestimate how empathetic they are. There have been quite a few studies done where people
Overestimate.
Yeah, they overestimate. Often I think, are you empathetic? Oh, yes, yes, yes. But actually, surveys show, and there's one survey I talk about in my book where, they asked the leaders of an organization if they were empathetic. I think 95% of them said they were empathetic. And then they surveyed the rest of the organization. There was, quite a gap. I think it was something like 70% or something. There's a 25% gap. So people overestimate it. And yeah, I mean, it's really very important. Also, talking just to add, even to widen the whole subject, what the younger generation now, the Gen Z want, and even up to a point the millennials also, is they want bosses that are empathetic. They're looking for that. So to attract and retain talent, it's an important aspect as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for what I do as well, everyone.
Yeah.
Either we talked about it at the beginning, people leave bosses. People also follow people.
They do.
A lot, and often you say, "Oh, how did that move come about?" And "Oh, that's interesting." And so often it's like, "Oh, my old boss went, and they wanted to take me with them, and I got a call a year later, and they're like, come, and I love that boss."
Yeah.
So no, I completely agree. It's again, it just for me, it's the human connection stuff. Like people want to feel a connection and respected and valued and things like that.
You're right, and I think it's a shame that some leaders feel a bit worried about the empathy bit. They think they're going to be soft, or they're going to be perceived as too kind, and because they don't understand what empathy is, I think that's a problem. So
people mistake it for weakness. Maybe it's not weakness; it's massive strength.
Exactly. Yeah.
I completely agree. I wanted to say one interesting thing as well. I think a lot of this stuff, when you have a wonderfully diverse team, loads of different opinions, different people from different backgrounds and stuff. Humans I always find it funny. Like a lot of humans find it very difficult to have a conversation with people about something they disagree with without it turning into an argument. And if you agree with that, I'd say
they do.
Any kind of thoughts on how you can navigate some of these? So you're bringing your whole self to work. The environment's conducive to, the boss is awesome, super empathetic, encouraging people to have conversations and all of this.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly get all of these different. How can you kind of navigate that as an individual?
It's quite tricky, isn't it? I mean, I think you're kind of talking about some sort of conflict, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, this happens a lot because conflict is normal at work. I mean, I would say it's a healthy thing. I think the way to navigate it is to navigate it with emotional intelligence. So it's really important for each party to first assess their own emotions. So how are you feeling about this, right? What's going on with you? So before you have, if you're going to have a conversation, you can prepare for that conversation. You can prepare for a conversation that's going to happen. If you're feeling upset or frustrated or sad or whatever, analyze and think about what's going on for you. And then also at the same time, think about how the other person might be feeling. So again, you're using this empathy to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. And then when you approach a conversation like that, if you approach it from a place of, oh my God, this is going to be awful, or it's going to be tense again, or whatever, you've already lost. You've lost already. So you have to say, this is a conversation. We don't really agree at the moment, but there's an opportunity here for us to work together and to try and listen to each other's perspectives. And maybe we're not going to agree yet, but maybe it's one conversation on the step to agreeing, right? Yeah. So take it like that, not as a battle, but just like this is just an important element. And then, of course, if you're in the moment when you're having that conversation, again, emotions play a big role. So you have to monitor how you are, how you're feeling, and you need to be aware of what's going on. And if you feel that your emotions are rising, then you need to be able to stop. You need to be able to pause, have a break. So these are really managing yourself. And then showing empathy to the other person in a sense of listening to them, listening to their point of view, showing that you're listening. So again, this is all about listening and how you listen. And making sure that everybody can talk and express themselves, but also realizing that several conversations might be needed. You're not going to necessarily sort things out immediately, but there's quite a lot of emotional work to be done.
Yeah, loads. It's such a big thing, because you look at, if you just kind of look at the macro, you've got social media where some social media platforms, maybe Twitter's probably a good example, where just there's a lot of venom and just very polarized views and stuff. LinkedIn's a bit different because it's professional, so it's a lot. But if you look at the conversations on LinkedIn, more thoughtful, measured. People tend to
it's more
go
measured,
too extreme. It's because it's your it's your things. It's funny because on the one hand, forgetting LinkedIn and stuff, but you've got social media platforms and the media and politics and things like that, where it gets very aggressive. Then you come into a work environment where you can't behave like that.
That's right.
Like, I think if you behave like that, to your point, people want a human connection. They want to work with good folks, and you got to behave in a more say balanced or more appropriate way.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of those conflictual situations come from a place of fear. I think we're often afraid when we don't understand people or we're not comfortable with people. There's often we come from a place of fear. There's something that's worrying us. And so it's addressing that as well. And that can be addressed by open talk conversations, by sharing, by being curious about each other and listening to each other. You can really get rid of a lot of that.
And that's the whole beauty of having such a diverse workforce, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you want to work in a place where you've got all these different perspectives and views, and so interesting. And I completely agree. Like, come from a place of curiosity, like seek to understand, listen, ask questions, listen.
Of course. I
mean,
absolutely.
It's powerful.
Except it's not really done enough yet.
It's not done enough. But look, it's also a great way to build a relationship with someone, because people like people who listen to them.
Exactly.
And you take a real interest. And I bet you find that you have way more in common, way more in common than you think.
Absolutely. And also we come to this golden word that I keep hearing all the time, which is time. Everybody's got deadlines. Everybody's got to deliver. If people are chasing their tails all the time, and I haven't got time for this nicey talky type stuff. But actually, it's time well invested, and it should be a discipline. There should be moments set aside for this, because it will help in the delivery. So it's key, in my opinion.
Come on, everyone's got 24 hours in a day. It's the one equitable thing on this planet. You just have to decide how you spend it. And investing, I mean, come on, it can be 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, it can be half an hour.
Absolutely.
You've got to spend time with people to build a relationship with someone, right? You can't just do it on Teams chat or Google chat or something.
Exactly. So there's work to be done there. And one of the things that we do at HumanForce is that we work with leaders to train them to have difficult conversations, because a lot of leaders will avoid it. It's the sort of thing they don't like to do, because either they've done it badly in the past, or it hasn't worked out in the past, or they're just worried to upset people. But it's actually very important. The number of difficult conversations you have to have at work, it happens a lot.
Absolutely. It's cool. So, I mean, even with this virtual world, I mean, we have like a range, right? Some people in the office, some people in mixed. I think plucking up the courage to do it face to face is good. But I mean, again, even video is I think good if people are different countries and stuff.
It can be done. It's just a skill. It's something you have to learn and practice, and for some it comes easier than others, obviously.
Love that. Natalie, thank you so much. I think for me, the human skills are just the most important things to train and develop. Even when all this AI stuff's coming and whatever, I think people still need this. They want this human thing. People buy from people, work with people, and until maybe.
The human beings are your most valuable assets. So you need to invest in them. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much. Where can people find your book?
go to Amazon, type in my name or the title HumanForce and you will find it.
I love it. I love it. And then you're also a consulting firm as well.
Yes, we do work with leadership. We train, coach, and consult leadership around building, human-centric workforces. So, yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, congratulations on the book. It's been really nice to speak with you. And if people haven't already, connect with Natalie. I'm sure you're on LinkedIn and all of that stuff as well.
I am. Yeah. Thank you, Lewis.
Amazing.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Have a good one. See ya. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do not forget to subscribe in all the usual places: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you like to watch or listen to a podcast. Any comments or feedback, please drop us a DM. If you've got anything that you want us to discuss, again, feel free to get in touch.